Hey, alchemists. So, our theme this year is alchemy. And alchemy is the science of transformation, which means it fits in perfectly with our unity philosophy. And so, today, up close and personal, I want to talk to you about the journey of the alchemist. Now, when I've mentioned alchemy, sometimes to people, they think like, oh, that's like woo woo stuff, right? But actually, all of us practice alchemy in some way. If you mix essential oils, you're basically an alchemist, okay? Or if you are working on getting physically stronger, and so you go to the gym and you get personal training, then maybe you're an alchemist for your body. Maybe your personal trainer is an alchemist. Okay? If you can make a grilled cheese sandwich out of 3 really delicious cheeses that are super melty, and you slather it in butter and dip it in Parmesan cheese and then grill it up, you're an alchemist. Okay? You're an alchemist. So, this is what Carolyn Mace has to say about alchemy. The journey of the alchemist is about transformation, the capacity we have in ourselves to transform the experience of our lives from something that looks overwhelming into something from which we derive gold. Okay, transforming something in our lives that looks overwhelming, feels overwhelming, and we transform that into something from which we can derive gold. Okay, so an alchemist will be able to look around at every experience and ask, all right, what is the gold that I can mine from this experience? So, first of all, an alchemist knows 3 things. They know that everything is energy. They know that energy follows thoughts. And they know that energy is impressed upon matter. So how would this look in real life? Well, I remember back when I worked for this mortgage company, I worked in a big department and I had a lot of bosses. And one of my bosses calls me and says, "Can you come into my office one day?" Right? Well, I automatically assumed, what did I do? Am I in trouble for something? And I felt the stress response. And so I'm walking to his office, getting more and more stressed out. And I get to his office and he says, I think you left your book sitting there in my chair. And sure enough, it was my book. I had left it there when I was there earlier. But energy follows thoughts. I'm in trouble. And energy impresses itself upon physical matter. Okay, the stress response of all that cortisol dumping into my system. Okay, so an alchemist, knowing these 3 things means that they do things differently in their lives. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. How an alchemist becomes a spellbreaker. An alchemist is aware of the consequence of their choice. And an alchemist is willing to get uncomfortable because the transformation process is uncomfortable. So let's talk about being a spellbreaker. We all know that words carry great power. We have injured people with our words. We have healed people with our words. And we've had the same happen to us, right? But a spell, it's basically a thought form that gets into our head and it has influence over us. It has influence over our choices. Okay, this is a spell. You could call it a mind virus, but I'm going to call it a spell because I'm talking about alchemy. Okay, so when my son was little, I cast a spell on him. I told him, because he wanted to chew some gum. So I told him, all right, you can try this gum, but don't swallow it. Whatever you do, don't swallow it. It would be very bad if you swallow this gum. It's only for chewing. When you're done chewing it, you spit it out. You don't swallow it. It's bad if you swallow it. So my little kid, my little son, my little beloved, he's chewing his gum. And of course, after about a minute, he accidentally swallows it. And then he cries and he cries And he cries, right? Proud moment. I had cast a spell on him and it scared him. Now I had to recast this spell. I told him that I was sorry. That I was sorry I scared him. I said, we have to be real careful when chewing gum, because if we chew it and we swallow it, we might get a stomach ache. Do you have a stomach ache? No. Then you're fine. Everything's fine. I'm so sorry I scared you. Okay? So as parents, we cast a lot of spells, right? And we've had so many spells cast on us too. Like so many, we can't even count them all. Okay? Now some of the more common spells will look like this. If I help so-and-so, if I empower them and support them and they become really successful, then they'll leave me behind, or there won't be enough for me. Okay? Or if we blaming is being under a spell. Okay? Because we're blaming a condition, an event, a person for the reason that we can't be happy. Okay? So blaming's a spell. If we say to ourselves, I'll never be loved well enough, I'll never succeed, I'm just a failure, okay? I'll never be as good as so-and-so, I'll never be as popular as so-and-so. We are under a spell. Okay, none of those things are true. Okay, we're under a spell. To break a spell, and we can break a spell, it just takes, I say just, it takes commitment and it takes diligence. It's simple, but it's not easy, right? Because we really have to pay attention to our way of thinking. Now, I did manage to do this for myself. When I was younger, I used to give up on things really easy. I would say, I would dream about it, I would imagine it and think it would be amazing. But then when it came down to actually taking action, I would think, this is really hard. I'm a failure at everything. I'll never be able to do this. Somebody else could do this better than I could do this. Like I'm not good enough. That was a big one for me. I'm just not good enough. Who am I to think that I could do this wonderful thing? So when I really started getting into the unity principles, and I credit the unity principles with really helping me to catch this behavior in myself. It's God is all things, and that means me. And we create our experiences from our way of thinking and acting. And prayer and affirmative prayer, meditations, align us with the divine within. And it's not enough to just know these things. We must live them. Okay? So I started paying attention and I could hear my words to myself. So I started changing my vocabulary, right? I started saying, well, if I have this idea, where do I think this idea came from? God is all things, and that means my idea. I'm excited about it because I'm being divinely inspired. And if I'm being divinely inspired, it means the universe has my back. Okay, so that's how I was changing my thinking. So one of the things that really does help us to change our way of thinking is to practice something called denials and affirmations. So a denial is, we're not denying a condition or pretending it doesn't exist. We're denying that it has power over us. Okay, and then we affirm how we really want to show up, okay, for ourselves. So currently, this is what I'm working on. Being disorganized and feeling overwhelmed by that. And I caught myself saying, I'm so disorganized. I'm so disorganized. I'm so overwhelmed with all this. I don't even know where to start. So maybe I'll just sit and watch Netflix for a little while. Okay, that's my go-to. So I caught myself thinking that. So I practice a denial, which is not denying that I'm disorganized, because I'm clearly very disorganized. So my denial looks like this, or sounds like this. Well, yeah, I am pretty disorganized. It's a mess, but it's not going to stop me from going ahead and picking my next project. I will pick my next project. I can see it. It's right there. Okay, so there's my denial and there's my affirmation. All of this stuff is supposed to be practical. Okay, it's not supposed to be woo-woo. We can't wrap our minds around it. It's practical. Okay, it's just practical. Okay, another thing to pay attention to is if you're highly reactive to something, you're probably under a spell. right? And those when we're highly reactive, we're not thinking, we're not consciously present in that moment, right? We're reacting to something. If we were consciously present, we would respond to something, and there's a difference. Okay, so somebody cuts you off in traffic and you start yelling at them. Okay, you're under a spell, right? That's a spell, right? If you think that you're entitled to have a clear road ahead of you, that's a spell. Okay, all right, so we get a new vocabulary. Okay, we pick our words of power. We pick our words of power. I am created in the image and likeness of my creator. I am designed to do all these things. I am very creative. I'm a curious person and I discover new things all the time. Okay, so we have our words of power. Now, when we change our language, we change our vocabulary to ourselves, we break the spell. And when we break the spell, our life changes. So an alchemist becomes a spell breaker. Then the alchemist is aware of the consequences of their choices, right? They ask, what will this choice cost me? Okay, if I decide to skip going to the gym this morning, what will this choice cost me? Well, later on, I'll feel bad about myself. I'll feel some shame. What if I go to the gym? What will this choice cost me? It will cost me time and energy, physical energy. But it's a choice that fuels my spirit, so it will fuel my body. And I will come home and I will feel good about myself later. Okay? Now, this is a quote from Carolyn Mace. What drains your spirit drains your body. What fuels your spirit fuels your body. Every choice we make, it either drains our spirit or it fuels our spirit. Okay, so we want to look at those choices, right? If I make the choice to give into a shopping addiction, does that fuel my spirit or drain my spirit? Right? I may initially think it fuels me because I get this kind of a rush, to purchase something. But then after I buy it, I'm like, oh crap. Now I don't feel so good about it. Okay? So what are these choices that we are making? Do they drain our spirit or do they fuel our spirit? Now see, this is energetic currency that we are working with here. And every time we make a choice that drains our spirit, we are adding lead to our soul, right? We're adding lead into our heart. And it can feel like we're adding lead to our physical body because we'll start feeling more disempowered. We'll feel heavier. We will feel sluggish. Okay? Now we can still be creators, but creating healing or creating joy in our lives will take longer because of the weight of the lead in our soul. Weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, means weight, W-A-I-T, right? So things will take longer. Lead is the heavy weight in our soul, and it takes away our energy for creating health and joy and abundance and love. Okay, so the alchemist makes choices that fuel their spirit. Okay, they make choices that are in integrity with how they want to show up in the world. They keep promises to themselves and others. They watch their thoughts, right? They practice the denials and the affirmations. They go through, like if you're a unity person and you're an alchemist, maybe you're running through the 5 principles every time you're just thinking about a choice. Okay? So they're doing the work. All right, so the alchemist is aware of the consequence of their choices or the cost. Okay, the cost of the choice. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the alchemist is willing to be uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable. Transformation is uncomfortable. When we start dreaming about changing our lives, now this is the funny part. There's no consequence when we're just dreaming about it. There's no cost when we're just dreaming about it. Okay, if you want to fantasize about having a giant farm and raising baby dinosaurs, there's no cost to that. You're just enjoying a little fantasy in your head. Okay? So we don't get uncomfortable when we're just daydreaming about things. That's not uncomfortable. But eventually we do have to make decisions, and we do have to make choices that if we are working to transform our lives, we're going to be taking actions that impact our lives. And I think one of the best examples of this is somebody who's decided they need to get a divorce, right? That they are just not with the right partner, that this is a hard relationship for them. While they're just thinking about the divorce, of course, there's no impact on their lives. But then eventually they make a choice, and that will greatly impact their life, right? And so as we're going through this process where we're first imagining like how we want to be creating in our lives, eventually we're going to have to make a decision, and we're going to ask ourselves this question: what's it going to cost me, right? What's the consequence if I do this? And am I willing to pay the price? Okay, now in many cases we're willing to pay the price because we know we can see the big view, right? We can see the long view. But when we start changing our life, right there at the beginning, that can be really hard, right? In fact, it can feel like things are falling apart in our lives. But see, this is what the transformation process is. It's breaking down one thing to make way for another. It's shedding one thing to make way for another. And of course, the best metaphor for this is the caterpillar turning into a butterfly. The caterpillar has to wrap itself in its cocoon, and it literally has to break down at the molecular level to reassemble itself, to reassemble its cellular structure to become a butterfly. It doesn't just strap on some wings, okay, and say, oh, okay, I'm a butterfly now. No, it totally breaks down, totally restructures itself. And sometimes that's what happens to us when we are in the process of creating transformation. Feels like everything is breaking down. Now, life gets uncomfortable. We know this. Growth and transformation are uncomfortable. We know this. And the alchemist is willing to be uncomfortable, right? The alchemist is willing to do that hard work, okay, and stick with it. So the alchemist accepts this, right? The alchemist accepts that this is where they are. The alchemist accepts, which means now they can decide, well, can I change this? Or do I have to rise above it? Right? This is our starting point. This gives us a starting point. We accept what's going on. We accept the discomfort. And now we know where we're starting from. We're starting from right here, where we are right now. Right? Do I have to let go of something? Do I have to really get into some forgiveness now? Maybe that is, right? So we're changing or we're rising above, but we're moving forward again, right? And eventually it won't be so uncomfortable. So an alchemist becomes a spell breaker. And then the alchemist is aware of the cost of their choices. And then the alchemist is willing to get uncomfortable, right? To accept and let go. Now, when we know how to do this, wherever we are then becomes the perfect place to start. When we know how to do this, then here, right here, we can go anywhere from right here. You can go anywhere from right here. Okay, if there was an astronaut in this room with me right now, this astronaut could go into space from right here. I mean, they'd first have to go to NASA, wherever that is, Florida, Texas, and then they could go to space. But see, even from right here, they could still get to space eventually. All right, and so the alchemist starts right where they are. So this is our call to action for this week. I'll start with our affirmation. I make choices that fuel my spirit. Okay, let's say it again together. I make choices that fuel my spirit. Our lives are filled with choices, right? There's always a new decision to be made. And at the same time, we have to also be responsible. But even in being responsible, we want to pay attention that we are making choices that fuel our spirit rather than drain our spirit. Because as we make choices that fuel our spirit, we get to start from where we are and we'll figure out, can we change this or can we rise above this, right? So here's my invitation for you this week. Ask yourself this question, all right? If I were an alchemist, how would I choose right now? Right? If I were an alchemist, what is the gold that I could mine from this experience? Because it is through our choices and it's through mining the gold of our experiences. Well, that's how we're creating heaven on earth now, isn't it? So until the next time, remember, you are divinely designed to be doing all of this. You are a one-time, one-of-a-kind cosmic event. In everything you do, you are blessed. And so it is.